Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, we're live today. We're joined, as always, by Dan Infalt and special guest, Joe Elsinger. Joe, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I feel like I'm a stranger on here, but I'm honored to be able to join you guys and chat it up.
Yeah, it's been a minute before we jumped online here. We were talking, and I think Dan mentioned, and I was creeping on a lot of old Hunting Beast threads today in preparation for this. And looks like your last post was sometime in February 2021. So it's been 3 full years, and I think the year before that, only a post here or there. So the episode is titled Evolution of a Hunter, and we've spoken some about what that means for you. So, and that's what we want to talk about today. Before we get started, real quick, Joe, for people that don't know you, you are known as JoeRE on the Hunting Beast. Yep. Give us a little bit of your background, who you are, how you got into hunting, and where you're at.
Yeah, thanks. So I grew up in the woods. Didn't have, we hunted to eat, didn't have much money, we needed to put stuff on the table. So, my earliest memories were hunting. I hunted stuff before I even got in the woods. I remember shooting when I was 6, 7 years old, shooting grasshoppers, shooting the heads off grasshoppers at the 22, or not a 22, a BB gun, just to, see if I could do it. And that evolved, squirrels, rabbits, deer, coyotes, turkeys, anything that was legal in Iowa, I hunted it. Made a ton of mistakes, didn't know what I was doing, but I definitely learned. I had an older brother, and we were fairly close in age, so we kind of just learned off each other. We didn't really have, my dad did a little hunting, but not a lot. Just kind of learned off each other, and one thing led to another. I spent the woods were my happy place. I think a lot of guys can relate to that. Growing up, I spent, every minute that I could all fall long in the fall. Caught the bow hunting bug when I was 13, 14. Bow hunted every day after school for 60 days straight. Burned out every spot I sat, 15 times straight, can't see any deer. I don't know what's wrong. No deer around, that whole junk. But gradually learned how to do it. Got better at it. And then, found the Hunting Beast in 2006, I bet, somewhere in there, 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. I was in college at the time, and all of a sudden, I knew some things, but there was a lot of things I didn't know. And then, the Hunting Beast, this wealth of knowledge, tons of Dan here and other hunters there that just knew extraordinary amount about deer hunting in particular. And then I knew when to shut up and listen, even though I probably talked quite a bit on there too, but learned a lot off of that. I grew up in Iowa, so obviously it's a target rich environment, as anybody knows in the whitetail hunting world. My background of just hunting to eat, and then having the ability of being able to be picky about what you get to go after in Iowa, put those two together and shoot a lot of big bucks. And I started doing a few podcasts and articles, and I really enjoy that because I really enjoy like just sharing knowledge. I've learned a lot from so many. Dan, so many people. I also think it's important to kind of mentor younger and newer hunters, especially there's a lot of like crap peddled out there in media and social media, about how to do things. You gotta, especially you spend all this money, you gotta buy this, buy that. Like, no, like honestly, I have in my entire life kind of enjoyed, hunting and being extremely lethal with like maybe mid-level equipment, like I've never owned $1,000 bow in my life. I don't think I've bought a bow that's more than $500 in my entire life, a compound bow, or even a, recurve, whatever, it's all about the person using it, honestly. Yeah, so anyway, that's kind of what led up to that. And then, I don't know if you get into kind of why I just kind of disappeared after, last few years, but
sure.
So
yeah. So you are a regular fixture. So like I said, I was looking at the Hunting Beast archives today, and you can search by author. And I found what looked to be one of your earliest posts in 2012. And then your last post, like I said, February 7th, 2021. And Joe, I want to thank you because you were kind enough during that time to communicate with me fairly regular. I was newer, had a lot of dumb questions. I think we were both interested in spreadsheets and data. So had a little bit of a common bond there. And I was emailing you to get on to my podcast back in 2021, and you politely declined. And I want to read what you said to me in that email as a jumping off point. And here's what you said. You said, at the root of my reasons, and this is the reason why you declined, at the root of my reasons is a growing certainty that's been in the back of my head for a long time that the content I've put out there about hunting big bucks and that sort of thing, while well-intended, in the bigger picture might help poison our hunting tradition. My impression is there's more die-hard hunters now than ever before, but less total hunters than ever before too, as guys fight each other more and more for the best spots and force each other out to buy and to lease the best land and to have the biggest bucks to chase. This is not a direction to go if we want our kids and grandkids to hunt. And at this point, I have my doubts if they will. I can't stop it, but I don't want to feel like I'm supporting it in any way either. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, that's I'd probably write it a little differently, but I still have those exact same concerns, and that's it was hard because I and a lot of guys out there, you have that desire to like pick, when you get to a certain point in your career, you want to pick a target and you want to go after it and you want to take that down, and there's nothing beats that feel. Nothing beats it. I still, I love it. Going after a specific buck, knowing what he's going to do before he does it, before he even knows what he's going to do, and kill him. Be there, and then, for the first thing he knows, there's trouble, there's an arrow in his heart. Yeah, like, then it gets out of control, everybody wants, not everybody, but, start taking shortcuts, like, well, if I surround him with cell cameras, that'd be easier. Or if I lease up all three of these properties that he's on, that'll be easier. Make sure I don't have any competition, like, that's fair. You can do that. But like, where does it leave everybody else? Like, we're a community, like we're all in this together. And at the end of the day, you can kick all the other hunters out in the neighborhood, and then, like, who's gonna advocate for you? Who's gonna, and make sure that we, hunting isn't banned. And that honestly, it really bothered me. It still bothers me. And that's why, like, I became just kind of really disillusioned with where it was going. You pay too much attention to social media, which isn't healthy for anybody, but, this stuff you see, and like, it's just, it's just a bragging contest. It turns into really rapidly. And I guarantee there's always somebody better than you, like if you've killed 3 200-inch bucks, well, somebody out there has killed 5, probably some old Amish hunter and he cut those racks into knife handles and you don't even know about it,
Right.
like, so, like, it honestly, so it really was, in 2020, I killed a really big buck, in the 180s. and like it was a target animal. He was only 4 years old. I should say, like that's an incredible deer for most places and incredible deer here. He'd even been bigger at 6. It's impossible not to think about that. Is it gnarly, non-typical? Is it gross in the 180s is non-typical. Anyway, shot it. Hunt's not that important as a rut hunt. But I was after him. And I came up and, I should have been stoked, but I looked at him and I was relieved. I was like, oh, phew, spilled my tag. And then I was like, well, what the heck? Like, why did I kill that deer? Just to be, I'm relieved to kill it, because I was like, well, I got it. Somebody else would have got it. Like I'm the, and that bothered me. And I set my bow down and I didn't hunt. It just really bugged me. I don't know, but I didn't really hunt for like a year and a half. I think I shot a couple of deer with like the muzzleloader, just for the freezer, just first deer I could shoot. But then after that, like I'm still a hunter. I mean, it's in my blood. I'll always be a hunter. And I picked up my recurve, which I've had my recurve for a few years before that, but could never justify like, like it's a little disadvantage, like it's going to be harder to kill that big buck with a recurve than a compound. That's undeniable. I picked it up, started shooting it, and I enjoyed it. And then I realized, like, man, I hadn't enjoyed shooting my compound for years before that. Like it was just a tool, like a hammer, I'm going to drive this nail. I'm going to kill this buck with my tool, all the recurve was totally different. Like it was, and ever since then, like into 2021, I haven't touched my compound, and I shoot that recurve almost every day. Almost 365 days a year. Not a lot, but a few shots every day. I got targets set up out back. I work from home most of the time, so like I can just walk out on my deck and it's pretty sweet. Just take a few arrows in between meetings. And I love it. I caught the bug all over again, and I wish. Honestly, this is why I agreed to like talk, because I don't want likes, I don't want follows, I don't want more Facebook friends. Like I want people to realize, like, if you're burnt out or if you're like not sure why you're hunting, like you can find reasons to hunt. You really can. It's still possible, because I'm not picky about what I shoot. I mean, I've shot a couple of yearling bucks my recurve, and I was tickled when those suckers hit the dirt. I was tickled, and the last yearling before I shot a couple of the recurve, the last like yearling buck I'd shot was when I was probably 16, I didn't think I would ever get that rush, from any old deer, and I do. I shot 3 deer with a recurve last fall, and every single one was such a thrill. Like, man, I could just get so stoked. Something about being able to see that arrow in flight, the compound. I mean, nothing against the compound. It's not, I'm not hating on that at all. It's just like, for me, seeing an arrow flying at 160 feet per second versus 260 feet per second, and seeing that hit the deer, and having to play the game so much tighter because you really want to get within 20 yards. And then seeing it all come together, it's just nothing beats it. Nothing beats it. And I know a lot of, like, if you're doing what you're doing and you're getting that rush and you're loving it, keep doing it. That's why, but like, if you're struggling, like, take a step back, change something up. Don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, I've gone through a lot of the stuff you're talking about, with my thoughts and my direction and stuff. And, I see it as guys like you and me. When we were in our 30s, we were ego driven, to a degree.
Yeah.
And there was a time when it was about beating everybody else. We were those competitive people. We were pushing our bodies and our marriages and everything else to the limits. And we were very successful for that. And then once you got to success, you settle down and you start to think about what you've done and how you've affected things. Yep. And for me, it became more about I still wanted to stay in the light, and I still wanted to be around people, and I still wanted to hunt big bucks. But what I wanted to do was be a good example instead of the example I was when I was younger.
Yep.
And try to lead young people and others to follow the right path, and it's hard with all the social media and stuff, like you said, out there. But years ago, one thing that helped me was I developed a goal, and that goal was to make people better hunters and hunters better people. And I think about that goal all the time. I think about it before I make DVDs or videos and all that I'm trying to lead by a good example. And I'm trying to show people that you don't have to be part of all that crap, but you can still enjoy hunting. And one of the hardest things is like yourself, when you talked about you couldn't believe that you'd actually like shooting a smaller deer and stuff. And I can see that, because the reason you don't believe it is because you think about what everybody else is going to think. But once you're out of that limelight, you walked away from it. What do you care what everybody else thinks? It's just you and your family.
Yep. You're preaching to the choir, and that's why I have always had such a huge amount of respect for you, Dan. Like that, make it clear, anybody listening, like me just kind of taking a step back. It had nothing to do with the hunting beast itself. It was like the larger, like hunting, like the industry, honestly, just the larger, everything outside of that just was really just making me pretty cynical. And I couldn't find the balance, like I didn't know how to stay involved and not feel like pulled into those things. And, and mental, you're absolutely right. Like egos, there's nothing wrong. There was actually I distinctly remember there was a thread or two about ego on the hunting piece that I loved. And there was, like ego itself, it's not bad. You need it to be driven and stuff. But then if you can't check it, you can't control it, it becomes a problem, and, you start comparing, like, I shot so-and-so shot a bigger buck than me. Like, like they shot 5 and I only shot 3, like it's just in the back of your head. And I don't want anything to do with that. And it's hard to find the happy medium until just I needed a fresh start, walk away from everything, and just I have done that a couple times in life, honestly, and other things. I think that's just personality quirk of mine. But I don't know. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And I wouldn't trade where I'm at for anything now. Like it got to, it was family, relationship. I switched jobs in there too. Like my job, I didn't feel like my job, I was spending a ton of time on my job. And I've always been an efficiency freak. Jeremy, I know you've kind of alluded to the spreadsheets and stuff. I'm a numbers guy. And for me, like I play with the numbers, I'm always trying to drive towards the end. It was like, I want to kill a big buck in less than 10 hunts, which is kind of crazy, but I was giving myself like less than 10 hunts, less than 10 bow hunts. I want to get the big buck on the ground, and just ruthlessly trying to push it down, stack the odds. Wasn't time, my kids were growing up and all that. Now, I take my son fishing way more than I ever used to. I have time for all kinds of other crazy stuff. I do a lot of coyote hunting, like a lot of other stuff that I honestly wouldn't have time, because it was hunt, scout, repeat. Just kind of, I still love deer hunting. I loved it. Like I said, I love deer hunting more than I have in a solid 20 years. So, yeah.
Joe, I know you've done some elk hunting. What was your experience like with that? I mean, just from the mental perspective, did you find yourself refreshed there? Because I know when I moved to Montana, it's been 5 years ago now, just getting to hunt different things, elk, antelope, chasing bears once in a while. It was that refreshed it a lot for me also.
Yeah. That's, if I didn't have family ties to the Midwest, man, a little jealous of you, Jeremy. Like, you did that. You moved out west. I'm sure a lot of guys say the same thing. Without those family ties, man, that would be kind of a dream for me. I'm not going to lie. I've been out. I'm actually going out elk hunting. I don't think I told either of you guys this. I am going out elk hunting this fall in Colorado, so
Nice.
get a chance with the recurve. I haven't gone out there with the recurve yet. Last time I went, I think, was 2020 in Wyoming. I shot a little bull. But yeah, I love it. I mean, it's a huge, so elk, well, it might piss a lot of elk hunters off, but I don't think the elk are that hard to kill once you find them. The hard part is finding them, and like once you locate them, they're not near as wary as whitetails. But like they're harder than heck to get, to like just get in the same zip code so on public land anyway. So yeah, in the country. I've got long legs. I love the I love topography. The bigger the hills, the happier I am. I think I grew up in far northeast Iowa, which those that know it, it's really rugged. Like most Iowa is flat and they're just rolling, but like northeast Iowa, I mean, it's got 300-400 foot bluffs. Like it's if you put it in Tennessee, they'd call it mountains, which is kind of funny to me, but it's not, that's a little bit of exaggeration. I know they're a little bigger there, but
you hear that, Tennessee? You got a bunch of foothills there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I just probably ticked everybody else off. I'm sorry, but I mean it kindly. So
well, let's we promised we wouldn't beat you to death on the tactics talk, but one of the things that I was always interested in that you were doing at the time on the Hunting Beast and sharing some of your findings were tracks, and you delved quite deep into tracks. So you had a good thread, and I didn't pull that one up specifically, about how sometimes big racked bucks had average size tracks, or sometimes big tracked bucks had average size racks. So maybe talk about your general findings on tracks and how you were able to identify different bucks and maybe some of the unique aspects of the track that would help you. I could go crazy on this.
I still pay
Feel
attention.
Free.
I mean, yeah, you can't take it away, so I was just 2 days ago, I was pointing out to my wife, we were out walking in a field and there was like a big track, cut across in front of us, and it's like, oh yeah, look at that buck, like it's left front track, and the outside toe is a little rounded. You can easily ID that sucker, it's there. And I still, every buck I shoot, even the little bucks, like these couple, I look at their feet. I started looking at doe tracks too, and there's actually quite a bit of variation with doe tracks. They don't get as beat up as bucks, which kind of makes sense. They're not fighting and like paw and scrapes and stuff like bucks are. But so one really interesting thing, I was actually with a buddy out in upstate New York in the Adirondacks, and we were deer hunting 2 years ago. That was the first time I went out there, and we tracking deer. And he got a really big buck, like a 140 class 10-pointer, which is a beast for out there. And I shot a little buck, and I don't have the photos handy, but those tracks were almost identical. The feet, almost. My yearling had huge tracks, huge for a yearling, and his had pretty small tracks for at least a 4-year-old buck. And there was a marginal difference. I would say like a 1/16 of an inch. It was incredible. Now that's not to say, like, you see a big track, yeah, it's going to be probably a big buck, it's just it's a range. The range is broader than most people realize. Like there's, honestly, and I still haven't figured this out, but like I went back and I kept track of like the really big bucks that I've killed, like 160 class or bigger. And like darn near half of them had small, like abnormally small tracks, and abnormally small hooves. Like I know I did that on the beast, but like I always take a picture, flip the hoof over and take a picture next to my hand. And my hands are, I got flippers for hands. I am a big guy. So, like it was consistent. That like a high proportion of them had just abnormally small tracks where you'd say it was a buck, especially by the gait, like they always have a bigger chest to their front front feet are a little wider and they kind of splay out a little bit more usually, and they're a little more beat up than a doe track. Usually the tip's a little more rounded. But they weren't that much bigger. You might have said like, oh, it's a 2 or a 3-year-old buck. Well, no, it's actually a 5 or a 6-year-old buck, you know? And don't get me wrong, there's some, you know, you see a big clodhopper track. It's a big buck, you know. I mean, it won't necessarily have a huge antlers, but it's a big old buck. But the one huge tip, pay attention to all the other things, and besides the size, like if it's in, like, is it you know, like what's it going through? You know, is it avoiding that thick stuff? It's got a 20-inch wide rack, you know, like that actually is a really easy. I mean, if you follow it for a ways, like you can tell quickly. You're like, man, it is not going between trees that are less than, 20 inches wide. Or, you know, if it's browsing in the snow, it's got really big. Often you don't see it because a lot of antlers are tipped up, but you can see their tine marks in the snow sometimes if the snow is right. But you kind of have to have just the right amount of snow and just the right shape of rack for it to really drag in the snow. Very much I've seen. And then just how it moves. I pay more and more, I pay attention to the width of the front feet as it's standing. If it's you can tell if it's got a big wide chest, it's a big old buck. Like even, it's just, you don't always see it if it's moving fast, but then it's like if it's browsing and it's kind of stopping and standing, and I couldn't tell you in inches, but like it's just like 2-3 inches wider than your average deer if it's standing there, and you're like, huh, like those front feet are like this far apart. Like that's a big beefy chest there. That's a big buck, even if it's like a marginal size track. It's interesting. Like I've especially in preparation for hunting out east and tracking deer. Like I listened to a lot of the Benoits and the Hellblood, and all podcasts and articles and stuff. I haven't heard them talk that much about it, but it was smoking gun evidence to me. I don't think it was just a random, like I don't think I found the only big-footed small buck, and my buddy shot the only small-footed big buck out there. Like I think that happens a little more frequently than people think.
The biggest buck I ever shot had small feet.
Yep. Dan, you got anything you want to add to the tracks? And maybe talk about, for people that are newer to looking at tracks, what are some, I mean, Joe covered a lot of stuff. What are some of your best tips, Dan, to help you?
Joe covered a lot of it. I mean, he just barely touched on it, but if you're listening close, that bucks are wider in the front, narrower in the back, where does are wider in the back and narrower in the front. So how the back feet step to the front feet will tell you if it's a buck or a doe in a lot of cases. I mean, a lot of cases it's really close. I mean, it can barely be to the outside or barely to the inside, but on a big buck, you'll see it. You'll see it, the front feet to the outside of the tracks. And you got to get to the point too, where you can tell the difference between a front and a back hoof too. But the back feet are actually the smaller ones. The front feet are the big feet. And I would actually, I was waiting for Joe to say it. I was wondering if he was going to, because when he was talking about it, it was kind of hard to tell the size differences. Yeah, when they're giant, you just know it's a shooter. I mean, when it's a coffee can size track, but that doesn't mean a medium size one is not a big buck.
And the depth, yeah, that's something else we had. Yeah, like based on the material you're in, if you got to be careful with that, because if it's soft mud, everything's digging in. But like if it's, compared to the other tracks in the area, if there's one track that's just gouging in, it's like, well, yeah, that deer's 50 pounds heavier or more than its neighbors.
I like to impact the soil with my heel and see what my heel will do to that soil next to that track. If a walking deer is making an impact on the ground, it's breaking off pieces and making them fly, it's probably got some weight behind him.
Yep. There's a big difference between a 120-pound doe and 250-pound buck, how they dig into the ground. Huge difference.
You guys have both traveled quite a bit. How much importance are you placing on like the relative size? So that's one thing that I've seen in my travels is a big track in one state's not necessarily a big track in another state. So a lot of times I'm just trying to look at as many as possible and find one that's relatively larger for that area.
I think our north states have a bigger buck. I think it's actually a different subspecies. So I think we get bigger tracks. So for a guy from Michigan or Wisconsin or something that's hunting northern deer, weight, 250 pounds with the guts in it. It's a little different than when you're hunting southern Iowa or Kentucky or Kansas. Those deer are a little smaller. They have smaller hooves. So it can trick you if you're not used to that.
Yeah. Let's shift gears here. Joe, you had some interesting observations again that you shared on the hunting beast. Two of them that I want to discuss. We can go in any order here. One of them was your findings on windy days, specifically like 20 miles per hour and over. And then you also had some good write-ups about what bucks tend to do for bedding when it's hot out. So go ahead and tackle either one of those.
Yeah. So that is I'm a data nerd. It's not for everybody, but I love just looking at patterns. It's kind of how I'm wired. And a couple of things I dialed into were temperature and then wind speed. Not everybody knows, but like the understanding wind direction and how deer move, in particular at bed, using wind to their advantage. Like that's been talked about a lot. But for wind speed, I haven't studied this much in flatter areas, so I don't know how it applies as much, but I do know in the bigger bluffs, it pushes them down, honestly, I really love the super windy days. Ever the last few years, I just love it because for one, it keeps a lot of other hunters out of the woods because nobody wants to be in a tree that's, going around and around and around.
Right.
A lot of time, deer that's the thing. Deer don't actually like the wind that much either. That's what I've concluded. But you might be in a tree that's just swaying around crazy, but where they're at, it's not that bad, 15 feet below you. And those are those little pockets that they stack up in. Because the high wind, how I see it, it eliminates a large proportion of where they would have been. Or reduces the odds of it, and it concentrates them. There's just these pockets where they still feel secure. Maybe there was, in other wind conditions, there was 15 different places a big buck might have gone and been secure. It's all about security. Well, half of them, or more than half of them, the wind's screaming, like it's darn uncomfortable for him. He doesn't really like it, and he still might be there, but he's more likely, if he can find somewhere that's equally secure, but feels nicer to lay in, he's going to be up there. And so it really cuts down, especially in these bigger hills, and bigger ridges where, you can get wind, it can be blasting down one valley, and another valley, it's kind of calmer. Another factor, high winds. Everybody know in big hills, like the swirling winds, everybody's gotten busted by those swirling winds. And it's somewhat more consistent. I found once you understand the topography of how winds interact with bigger hills than in smaller, flatter hills. In high winds, it can be coming every which way, and just basically it can make some places unhuntable from a wind standpoint because it's literally coming from every direction every minute. But the big hills, like I love those winds that are blasting over across the ridge. And it's coming over the top, and it creates a vertical updraft, and it pulls your scent up. And I've had some of my favorite hunts in those conditions, and I'm waiting for a blasting wind. The winds and on the leeward side of the hill, low on the leeward side, your scent's actually getting pulled up, and deer can't smell you. Like I'm dropping milkweed, and it's going up the tree. It's not going down; it's going up the tree. I had a buddy come hunt Iowa, and I put him on a spot, and he killed a great big buck in a spot just like that. And he was like, I kept dropping milkweed all morning long, and it kept going straight up the tree, and he had deer all around him. They didn't have a clue he was there. He got in there before him, and that's one way of using the light and variable wind, the lightest winds. Those are okay too if it's nice weather out, because you get thermal activity. And thermals, it can be really consistent. But the days I hate are the dark, gloomy days where it's also calm and there's not much thermals and there's not much wind. And that's where you get the flows and the eddies and stuff moving around. There still can be thermal, but thermal is strongest if you got temperature differential, which is all about a little bit of sunshine. You want some sunshine, warm up the hills, moving up and down, and cooling off at night. It cools off faster if it's clear out. So those are a couple things. And then temperature. This was really interesting because I would put trail cameras out back when I ran a lot of trail cameras. I don't even run trail cameras anymore. I do put a few cameras out up in northern Wisconsin, as much to get pictures of all the other critters, the bears and the wolves and few elk and stuff as deer. Love watching that. But in Iowa, I used to run tons of cameras. Don't anymore. Do I miss looking at the pictures? Yeah. Do I miss hanging all those and picking them all up? No.
Right.
Might I do it again? I don't know. But, towards the end, it was 15, 20 cameras all over across the 3-4 county area. It was a huge effort in July, August, September, and then picking them up, January, February, March, sometimes late into the spring. Anyway, that taught me a lot. And one of the things I really enjoyed about that was watching like the temperature bedding thing. I'd have cameras, usually it was on sheltered north sides, close to water, and as much, because not the water, I came to realize, because there's water all over here unless it's drought year, it was less so they could get a drink, and more that it was cooler. Close to water is cooler, I think, in denser vegetation, which means more shade, which means cooler, low on north sides. And I would only get big bucks using that bedding area, like low knobs on north sides, if it was like 85 degrees. If it was cooler, they wouldn't use it. So all fall long, I would have like a big buck on there like 6 times, but every day was over 80 degrees that it was on camera. Like it was very interesting to me. I don't think I ever actually killed one doing that, but it's always in the back of my head to be like, take advantage of that with the right condition. Mostly, I freely admit, I don't like sweating. I will hunt. It's 20 below zero, but if it's 85, we all have faults, and my fault is I'll probably make an excuse if it's 85 degrees, and I'll wait for it's a little cooler because I don't like sweating. So I sweat easily. Like I don't mind sweating, but it's just sitting there swatting mosquitoes and sweating. Dan, I know you've more hard. I remember some of your stories about killing bucks, when it's super hot out. Anyway, yeah. And the same with cold. Cold, they're more likely to, if it's sunny, they're going to want some sunshine if possible, not give up security, but if they can find an area where they have a little bit of sun exposure, they're far more likely to use that. Cedars, this is interesting. In hills, when it's cold out, the deer leave the cedars. They'll bed on the edge of them. If you look real close, they're like, oh, they're in the cedars because it's say windy and it's security. No, they're like right on the edge of them, but they won't go into them that much. They won't bed into the cedars if it's super cold out because it's colder under the cedars, but they'll bed on the very edge if it's sunny, and they'll get that sunshine, and they'll still be insecure. Like they'll be tucked in there. They just want, if you like, they won't be 20 feet into the cedars. They'll be right on the edge of the cedars. I'm talking cold, like 20 degrees, 10 degrees, 0 degrees, snow on the ground. And they'll browse those cedars. If snow gets deep enough, that's kind of a secondary food source. They'll start hitting those cedars hard. But that was another thing that turned me on. Like I'd put a camera, let it soak, on a bedding area under the cedars. And they like being under the cedars when it's hot out because it's cooler, but naturally under the cedars. And I finally ran across a study or two that actually measured the temperature difference between under the cedars and like on the edges and out in the open areas. And that it kind of confirmed what I was thinking. Under the cedars is cooler, which is good when it's hot out. And not to say they might be tight to the cedars if it's windy in the cold, but they won't get under the cedars. It's colder. So yeah. Anyway, that's lots of lots of things still rattling around my head.
Yeah, you probably don't just forget that stuff, I'd imagine.
No.
Yeah,
and I still, like I may hunt differently. I hunt with a recurve, and like a doe comes by, a little buck comes by. I mean, I'm slinging an arrow, but like I'm still a beast hunter. Like that's a mentality, and I will always like I don't know. I wouldn't say. I mean, it's a point of pride, but like you want to be the most lethal hunter that you can be. Like that is. I'll always I want to be the most lethal hunter. I want to be, shoot, like I practice my recurve at 50 yards, not to shoot a deer at 50 yards, but so I can be lethal at 25 yards, so that same type of thing applies.
The northern slope stuff, that's interesting since moving out west. I mean, I'd done some hill country hunting like Southern Ohio, things like that, where they're pretty good sized hills. They're the kind of hills that we're teasing in Tennessee, right? They might call them mountains some places, but yeah, a couple 100 feet elevation. And I thought about it a little bit, but not much. But when I moved out west, northern facing slopes are such a big part of elk hunting because for people that don't know, out west Montana, specifically central Montana or eastern Montana, where you're not the full blown mountains, it's a lot drier than people realize. And a lot of Montana is like technically a northern desert. So you don't have anything that's exposed to the sun often, southern facing slopes. A lot of times they don't grow trees or they don't grow vegetation. It's just too dry. So a lot of your forest, which is your shade because it's a hillside, is on your north facing slopes. They stay moister. They have more food. They have more bedding. They have a lot of times they have springs, and that's where you find the wallows. So it's become a big part, and I can see, Joe, what you're saying. That's part of the reason I asked you about it, because after the fact, I read that post you made, I don't know what year it was, 15, 16, somewhere in there. And then I moved out west, and like a lot of light bulbs went off, and I thought back to that. I was like, it applies to deer hunting too. Yeah,
that's when I first took my first couple of elk hunting trips. I learned that exact same thing. I was like, whoa, like I didn't realize until I was seeing it that, by far the heaviest cover was consistently on northern slopes. And then layer on top of that, you just look for areas that you're like, I don't want to pack an elk out of there. And that's where you go to find the elk.
Sure. Not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Yep. So I'm at the point now, like out in Wyoming, last time I went out, like didn't scout, didn't anything, just looked up areas, and I just started circling areas like thickest cover, and that's gonna suck if we shoot an elk down there. And yeah, that's where we found the elk. Like it was a high proportion of the time, like 70% of my guesses were right, I would say. Never having laid a boot even in the entire state of Wyoming elk hunting up until that point. So yeah.
Well, I want to ask this next question to both of you, and this was something that you had a post on back in the day also, which was finding dead bucks in bedrooms and how maybe that was something you could capitalize on future hunts. So give me your thoughts there, and then we'll have Dan chime in too.
Yeah. So I remember, so that's a big thing. I always have, always will. Like I see a dead deer, I'm looking around, like, why is it here? Like not just like, oh, how to kill or how, like how big is it? It doesn't matter. Honestly, it was human killed or coyote killed or old age or rut or, like if it looked like it traveled a distance before it died, there's a reason it is in that spot. It's another thing if it got hit by a car when 50 yards died, but like if it went a distance and you get the impression that it probably traveled a distance before expiring, or was sick or hurt, there's a reason it's there. And it's very often in a bedroom. There was one, and I remember that's probably what I posted about. And this came full circle. It's interesting, and it touches on a lot of other things. I think I found 3 or 4 nice bucks within a 50-yard circle or something like that in sequential springs. Every spring I'd like scouted that area, shed hunted that area, found a dead buck. And I killed it. And I killed, I think, 2 big bucks out of that. It was a fantastic. It was just there was a couple of different winds they could hunt. They could sit on it. A couple of little knobs off secondary points off of a big ridge. And a lot of there was a lot of cover there, but not very many really good bedding options in the larger area. Like it was, it's hundreds and hundreds of acres of continuous timber in that area, but there was just a couple that were like far better escape routes and visibility and kind of wind stream for a big buck to lay up on. And so it was a super prime area. Well, I killed a couple bucks out of there, and then somebody else found it. And unfortunately, as happens more often than not, it seems like I deal more with pressure coming from private land than from the parking lot, because usually I'm finding the very back corners of stuff. And a ladder stand went up, and a cell cam went up, and the scrape dripper went up and went dead. And I haven't looked at it in the last year or two, but I checked it for 3-4 years, and it just wasn't getting the sign that it was supposed to. But I killed a couple of big bucks there, and I walked by that area several years until I found a big buck dead. And they weren't all big. I think there was 2 that were fully mature, and then a couple that were like 2 and 3 year olds. But I missed it. It was like so out of the way. They're so good at hiding. I walked by it, and then one day I was like, oh, there's deer hair. There's a deer near, and then found the cage. Found it, capitalized on it. Then I don't know if somebody else found it, or just whatever. But got burnt out in competition. So.
Yeah, the only thing I would add on that is that, if you're finding big buck skulls, dead heads in a bedding area, there's 2 things. Number one, like you said, they're going back to the bed, but there's also the fact that nobody else is walking there, or the head wouldn't be laying there. Yeah. They don't last long. Like one of the really good spots I found that was really remote was on an island, and I kind of wondered if people were getting to it. I mean, it was a mile walk, and you had to go through water over your knees for quite a ways through heavy cover. But at the same point, you could see this island from the road. You could see it from a parking spot, and you could see people wanting to go there. So I was a little worried about it, but I went out there, and I was kind of looking for sign and found some, like if you just get to the island, and I was thinking maybe it's just gun hunters. But then when I got to the point that, goes off of it, where to me or you, it would be an obvious deer spot, but to these other guys, they just go to the middle where the oak trees are or whatever. I found a few good dead bucks that had been there for years, laying right out in the open, and you could see the racks coming down this point, walking to them, and you're thinking, well, that means nobody walks over here. So that means that these bucks, this is an undisturbed spot. So it's the overlooked spot on top of it. So it's kind of a double whammy. I mean, you start finding big dead bucks, especially if you find more than one. Yeah. And they don't have to be big. But if you find one big one, it's a big buck bedding area. Then if you find other dead bucks, it's being used year after year.
Yep.
A lot of times you find scattered bones too in spots where people do get every now and then, but you see stuff has died there,
Yep. Yeah, I remember I only found one big buck in this bedding area, but it hadn't shed, it died, and the squirrels chewed off its antlers completely off, but there were stubs like this big around coming out of its head, So it took them 2-3 years to chew all those antlers up. It's a shame that it went to waste. I'd love to see what it was, but it was a big, teeth worn flat and pedicles like that, just chewed down to the skull. And I'm like, oh man, nobody's been here. Just starting to salivate. So looking for a tree.
I remember a spot I found. I was hunting this really big 8-pointer that we seen glass on a public property we never hunted, and it was a smaller property, kind of open. You thought, well, I can get on this thing, but there's a lot of hunting pressure, and we did end up seeing it once or twice. But I started to put 2 and 2 together. It had to be hiding someplace good because there was a lot of pressure there. So looking at it, there was like a field on the property, and the back side of the field was some thick stuff that was kind of overlooked and almost didn't look like it was on the property. And that's before GPS or Onyx and all that crap. So back in those days, people didn't notice those spots as much, but I'd be looking at paper maps to go, oh, that's public too, you know? So I go over there, and it was so thick you couldn't get into it. And I'm like, man, I bet you he's coming out of here. And I had to get down on my hands and knees and push my way into there. And when I got in there, it was only about 4 feet high, but from 4 feet down, it was open. And I'm on my knees looking around, and there are shed antlers everywhere and a couple deadheads, you know, and nobody had ever been in there because these sheds were like really old and like rotted kind of, and some of them were new. And I remember that was just like you hardly ever find anything like that nowadays, you know, but it was pretty cool.
Well, we're going to do some questions. Ashley just joined. Ashley, can we hear you
Hi,
today?
Ashley.
Can you hear me today?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we can hear you. Good. So
Hey.
Ashley, Joe, Ashley. Ashley is our live show moderator. So we get a lot of questions from the chat. So one last thing before we jump into the first question. This is a good quote, and this is a Joe Elsinger quote, and it was in a thread about how to kill a mature buck, and I thought it was very succinct and to the point. It says, "Don't be lazy." That means lazy with your effort, lazy with your hunting strategies, or lazy with your time. So I think anybody that's trying to kill a mature animal, that's sage advice. So Ashley, take it away.
Alrighty. So for starters, I wanted to thank the people that are the members. Steven, Trout and Morals, Oleg, Chris Ott, Wisconsin Bowhunter, Brian Griggs, Jim Funk, Zeke Outdoors, Andy P, Hunt 1969, J.R. Scott, Jimbo Slice, Ridge Reaper 7.62, Matthew, Tim, Derek, Steve, KZ River Kennel, Jimmy Gammons, and Ernie Berry. There's been getting more and more in the comments, and we appreciate it greatly.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So first question is Jacob Nolting. He said, if you had 1 week to hunt in a new area, how would you break it down as quickly as possible and still have some success?
So I'm presuming that's going in completely blind, you know. Like I freely admit I'm the type of person I like to prepare, you know. I think there's better instinctive hunters out there than I am. But if you're going in completely blind, honestly, I want to first like I approach it kind of excluding areas, the obvious, the areas that other hunters are obviously going to go. I'm just crossing those off, and I do this anytime I come across a new property that I want to hunt, new piece of public. Usually it's like 10% of that property that I'm interested in when it comes down to it. And then I am a firm believer on boots on the ground scouting, even if it means during the season and I want to hunt, you know, I'll hunt with bow in hand, stand on my back. And analogy, like I haven't been in a tree stand in a number of years. I'm a diehard saddle hunter. I hunted it with a tree saddle before it became cool. I will say that. So yeah. So I bought my trophy line tree saddle. Now I use a different one, but that was 2011, I think. So ever since then. Anyway, just swing a loop, you know, like what I like to do, I look at property, I cross off all the areas. Well, it's like, that's an easy ridge to walk down straight from the parking lot. I'm not even going to pay attention to it. I'll swing a loop around it, you know, maybe there's a, you know, just a little corner of public on that ridge behind it that's real hard to get to and nobody's going to want to pack something out of. So like, yeah, I'm definitely checking that out. And then looking at prime bedding, it's all about the bedding still. That's where deer during the day. It doesn't matter what you're after, honestly. Bucks, does, like seriously, like where are deer in the day? They're bedding, you know, like that was, it was like my light bulb went off, Dan, when it was one of the first things I learned in the hunting beast, you know, or like I realized, I kind of knew it, but like, well, shoot, yeah, of course, like, you know, like why am I hunting the food, you know? Anyway, and then go through it, you know. I firm believer, like I'll mark some points, you know, on a, anymore hunting app or whatever, and just hit those points. Every potential bedding or, pinch points, bottlenecks going into those bedding areas, check them all. And then once I will admit, I don't have high confidence in an area until I've seen it, like face to face. Like I'll do a lot of cyber scouting, but I am not somebody who thinks, I think cyber scouting gets you like 30% of the way there, maybe 20 to 30%. And then you gotta see it. You gotta see things like, how are people coming from private land to access that public land, coming off the backsides? Because that's a lot of the pressure that I deal with. I've always dealt with. I swear, just as many people are coming off the private than coming from the parking lot. And things like that, just, like, oh, they had a windstorm, 2 years ago, and the cover's way thicker than you thought it was going to be in this area. Things that aerial photos might not catch if they're a little older. And those are all real examples. I can think of one property in particular, like it's lights out hunting now, and it was crappy hunting 3 years ago because it was all mature oaks. Well, windstorm came by, and now the cover's so thick and nasty, nobody can get in. And, deer bedding everywhere because there's way better security cover, and all it took was one big windstorm, so yeah, that was kind of a roundabout answer, but and you break it down, boots on the ground, cross off areas that you don't think are worth it, focus on those areas that are the hardest to get to and most secure. So where would you go if you don't want to get shot, so.
All right. So next question is from Steve Denor. He said, Dan, have you ever hunted a season with a recurve?
When I was a child, I did a lot of recurve hunting as a kid. Kind of funny. I was listening to you. I think it was before the show, actually, talking about shooting the heads off grasshoppers. I used to shoot fallen leaves. I used to love to shoot leaves in the fall when the maple leaves would fall, waiting for a leaf to fall and then shoot it. But it's amazing how good you can get with a recurve. That instinctive thing takes over, and you can get incredibly accurate. But you can't put them down. You have to be shooting them all the time. You have to really work at it because you lose your form and stuff. Which is why I use a compound. I just don't put enough time into the shooting to do that. It takes some distance.
That's exactly why I didn't commit to a recurve. I owned a recurve for 3-4 years before I kind of committed to it, because I knew I couldn't put the time in. I'll own it. I wasn't willing to put the time in that it needed to be good at it. And now I'm pushing 3 years into using a recurve exclusively. And now, I'm getting good. It's crazy. You can shoot that sucker like you point a finger. It's uncanny. I am more accurate than I ever thought I could be with a recurve now. 20, 30 yards, 40 yards on an elk. Yeah. That sounds crazy, but the big thing with a recurve is it's so slow, so you got to know the distance precisely, and you have to make sure your target's not moving. So, right. 40 yards on an elk is 80 yards of the compound, it's insane. So,
that's wild. Brian wants to know, Joe, what's the longest kill shot you made on a deer with a recurve?
With a recurve? Yeah, that's a good they're still all within 20 yards. I just got done talking about how far you can push it, but you still it's all about, you want the best possible odds. And so this is a good example, especially with whitetails, because with other game, I mentioned elk don't jump the string near like whitetails. I'm sure there's some examples of them doing that, but they don't.
I got one on video last year. I can show you one time, Jeff.
There you go. Yeah, I believe it. There's a few.
Yeah.
So last year, shot 3 deer at the recurve. Perfect. All 3 perfect shots. Before that, I missed. I shot at 4. Got 3. The first one was a doe. It was looking at me at 18 yards. I thought I had her dead to rights, but the issue was she was looking at me, and she saw my arrow, and I thought I made a perfect shot. The arrow got halfway to her, and her belly hit the dirt and it went right over her back. You know, like it was insane. I wish I'd have got that sucker on video. But yeah, I take that back. They have not all been within 20 yards. The one was at 20, right around 24, 25 yards. Heart shot her. So doe. Yeah, and she didn't know. It was windy. Didn't know. Standing there, just looking around, looking away. Wasn't going to take a step. I was confident. So I would only take those, you know, because it takes a long time for that arrow at 160 feet per second to get there with a recurve and hit right where I wanted to. So, but that you do not try to do that without a lot of practice. So it's a lot of moving parts. So I probably should, I hesitate to, honestly, I hesitate to even talk about that stuff because that's, you know, somebody thinks they can pick up something and do that their first season or two, and you can't, you know, like you just can't. You're going to be disappointed. You got to get to the point of, you know, you can make it. Like, not, I think I can, but you have to know you're going to make it. Like that's where you have to be before you should give yourself permission to make that, you know, that shot. So.
There's a lot of sacrifice in choosing to go that route because you're going to have good bucks that go by you at 25 and 30 yards, and you have to be committed that you're not taking those shots. I mean, for your average guy, that's too far for a recurve bull.
Yeah, I wasn't willing to make that sacrifice for years. You know, it's like, oh, I like a recurve, but man, I can't let a buck walk at 25 yards. Like, that's my sweet spot with a compound. Like, I want that deer at 25 yards. Like, with a compound, that I have such high confidence. I was the one, I think I talked about it on the Beast, I would mess up the super short shots with a compound because it was mental. I would take it for granted, and I wouldn't pick a small enough spot. Like, I would, you know, like just classic mistakes. And I, even after many years of experience, I would make that mistake and I wouldn't pick a small enough spot on a buck 10 yards away, and I'd hit it poorly, or I'd miss it. But like, I made some bad shots at super close range that I really regret. Would love to take some of those arrows back with a compound. So anyway, it's a mental game. So
Ashley, I'm going to cut the line here real quick. Keith Stummer. So people that don't know, Keith is Clem's on the Beast. Big fan of Clem. So I'm going to cut the line for him. Keith asked, Joe, how do you hunt differently in northern Wisconsin versus Iowa? And I'm sure he wants to know because Keith is a big Northwoods guy.
Yep. Oh man. I love, like, this is crazy. People think I'm nuts, but like, if I had to pick, I would pick northern Wisconsin, hands down. Give Iowa away, let everybody else fight over it. Like, it sounds nuts, but that's me. Like, I'll hunt 120-inch deer up there long before I'll hunt 150-inch deer down here. I mean, I know that's because I grew up here and I got shot 20 of them. But, you know, like, up there, man, like, there's something about it. And it's a challenge. It's dealing with other big predators like wolves and bears, and like seeing how they impact. I know a lot of guys get mad about that stuff, but I just, like, it's competition, you know, like, they're a predator, I'm a predator, who's going to get them first? Like, it's that up there has taught me so much more. I freely admit, like, you know, like, I'm not fat, but like, I was lazy in Iowa, you know, compared to having to, what I had to apply up in northern Wisconsin, because the subtleties of the terrain, I mean, it's an order of magnitude more challenging to pick apart. You know, I still remember, I've been going up there for probably a little over 10 years with my buddy, and he, you know, the first time I was up there, I was like he was like, there's a deer trail, and I'm like, what? You know, like, it's pathetic. I hate to admit it, but it's true. Like, I remember that reaction. It's like, yeah, there's a deer trail. I didn't think it was a deer trail. I thought, like, yeah, a deer walked there 3 months ago, you know, like, it's just so subtle. And now I've learned to kind of, you know, pick it apart and break down the cover and really dial into, you know, like, well, there's a swamp. Well, what kind of swamp? You know, like, what are the transitions? You know, has it got tag alder in it? Does it got red brush in it? Is an old beaver slough? Is it a peat bog? Is it, you know, like, tamarack swamp? You know, like, all those are big variables in how the deer are gonna use them. Like tamaracks are terrible. Anybody who's tried to walk through a tamarack swamp, I mean, it's horrific trying to get them through for anything, including a deer, you know. Sorry, not tamaracks, tag alders. I meant tag alders. Tamaracks are open and much more easy to get through. Red brush, that's where deer like to bed. It's a little drier underneath. They like to bed in those pockets. You know, that's how you got to really break it down. And once you start breaking that down and you start learning that, then it becomes kind of as straightforward as a piece of farm ground, you know, where, you know, like, and you can't see it. There's a huge learning curve, you know, but you can really break it down. It's fascinating to me. I've gotten to the point where like there's areas, what I really like up there is watching how the rut affects deer movement. It seems to be way more consistent of like that. So for example, last fall it was wet, but the fall before was super dry up in northern Wisconsin. I think a lot of people probably might be able to reflect on this. Super dry. The swamps were way drier than they usually are. Well, deer will be in swamps. They don't mind wet, but when it starts to get frozen, you know, and crunchy ice and stuff, they don't like that. That's nasty, you know, like they'll clear out. But if it's dry and it's, you know, so they're not dealing with ice, then the deer were still in the swamps because it was drier and the water level is down, so they could get around easily, even though normally they would have cleared out. So like the rutting activity was way more focused on the swamps, and this was like the fall of 22 than normal. And you know, Buddy and I were able to capitalize on that and like really get into, like we go up there for, I don't hunt up there a lot, but we always go there for like 4 or 5 day hunt, you know, and we try to pick like kind of peak rutting activity, which is usually right at the end of October. It's not peak breeding, but it's right when the biggest bucks are up on their feet and kind of cruising. It's interesting. It's like, I'd say 2 to 4 days earlier than I'm used to in Northeast Iowa. And I think it's herd dynamics and a few other things. So, yeah, there's a lot of, and the other factor with when it gets cold and icy, I think predators can get out in the swamps and run on top of the ice and chase them down. So that's when the deer clear out and got to go somewhere else. And, you know, pack of wolves will move in at spots, areas where like great deer, pack of wolves shows up, no deer, you know, but it's not the end of the world. Just with the deer, the wolves are going to follow the deer. So yeah, it's going to suck there for 2 or 3 years, and then the wolves aren't going to be there anymore, and the deer are going to come back in, you know. So it's it makes it challenging, but I do love, I love the challenge, and I feel like I'm still just, you know, every day up there, just a kid, just learning, and just, you know, just love seeing all the animals, and usually nobody else for miles. So, you know.
So for the next question, Farrell is wondering, what kind of quivers have you tried and what style do you like?
Oh, good question. I'm not a good person to ask about brands because I just don't remember. I don't honestly don't care until I start to do research to buy some. I use it's a 2-piece quiver attached to my recurve, but I'm not married to it. That's where I'm at right now. I like the idea of attached quiver, only because just everything's all in one. I don't need to remember my quiver, you know, like to put the quiver on the pack, and then if I set my pack down, I don't have access to it. But it is marginally louder, which I don't like. A little more vibration that I don't like. I just changed it so I can get 6 arrows on it because I didn't like having just 5 arrows on that quiver. But I couldn't tell you what kind it was. It's a 2-piece attached. I could go all crazy on like what I've learned about, and this might show that I'm still a newbie for some of those guys that have been hunting with a traditional archery for 20 years. But, you know, I have learned so much about traditional archery, and I, you know, like where to start with your weight, you know, build that up, how to aim, with different styles for different people. I started out trying to shoot instinctive and gap shooting, and I was struggling. And then I discovered string walking, which a lot of people haven't even heard of string walking, but it's basically using the tip of your arrow to aim. Look it up if you don't know. And if you're struggling with a traditional archery and don't know what string walking is, please look it up. Do yourself a favor. It's what all the competition archers use, from what I understand. I'm not an expert, but and a lot of the purists sneer at it, which is all the more reason to use it. So
yeah, take that.
Yeah.
So Brian's wondering if you can tell the story of the one that got away.
Oh man, which one? Yeah, which one? Oh boy.
The one that hit the most.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, so this is a funny one, because this is the biggest buck that I'm pretty sure it's the biggest buck that I've ever seen. And there's only 2 deer that I think were legitimately close to, if not 200 inches, both typical deer, typical gross typicals. And this was probably 2015, 16, public land. There was this buck. This is when scouting hardcore, I put a bunch of cameras out for long-term intel. So I put them out, and I honestly didn't check hardly any. I checked a few of them, but not very many of them all season long. And then I'd check them after the season, and I'd use that information, see what bucks made it through the season and whatnot for the next year. Some of the bucks died, whatever. Sometimes I wouldn't capitalize on opportunities because there was a big buck there and I didn't get it. But there was this really nice buck. He really, really nice buck. He was 160s, 170s, clean 10-pointer. And there was a piece of public, and there's a valley that's super rugged. It's kind of a box canyon type valley that it's really hard to get out of. I don't go into too many details what it's like, but really hard to get out of. There's only a few really steep trails in and out, like deer trails. I call them goat trails. It takes a mountain goat to get in and out. And nobody can really access from down low. You got to access up high. So if you shoot a deer down there 300 feet down, you got to pack it up these nasty trails. And he liked it. So there was something I was watching for. My younger brother and I, between the 2 of us, I think we killed 3 different big bucks that learned over the years to bed down in that box canyon. And we just waited for another it was one of those areas consistently that was the most secure area. So inevitably another big buck would move in and we'd kill him. And what
doesn't sound very secure to me.
Yeah. Well, it's secure as long as you know what you're doing. So along came this, and those were like nice bucks, like 130s to 150s, really nice bucks, but not huge. Well, this huge one showed up, and I found out about it at the end of the season. Like he was there all season, and I didn't. I think I filled my tag somewhere else, and I think I got him pictures of his season, so I thought he made it through. And then I started studying it, and then I started scouting it. I was all ready to move in on that deer. The next year, I didn't know how big he was going to be, but I put a couple cameras in. So I wish I could show photos, but the trails he would come up on, there was like 3 different trails, and they were between giant boulders, like 30, 40 foot tall boulders, and they were just cracks in the cliff, and he would go up them. I've never seen any deer use these quite like he did. There were some other trails, but he always traveled those. And I was at the point, I was figuring I was going to have to stand on one of those boulders and basically shoot down like as he come past, like crazy. Well, I got a little greedy, and I checked my camera. they move into this area, which I see a lot of like bedding, seasonal bedding. It wasn't early season bedding, but they like to bed. Bucks like to move into this kind of low area because there's a lot of does in the area. In the pre-rut, they start hitting this. It's kind of rut-based bedding because it's fairly close to where the does are bedding, but it's still pretty secure. And I checked my camera and I got him on camera. And then this is just kind of crazy. Here, I got a picture down the trail with a sleeping bag on his back. And I was like, what the heck? Well, here, lo and behold, somebody else, I think, had found out about that buck and was going down there and sleeping down there. Because then like I trailed it and I found like he had a sleeping bag stashed under an overhang, and where he had rolled out and was like sleeping down there. Cause that's like, you can't get down in this thing without causing a bunch of noise and like disturbing a bunch. And I still don't know if he pushed that buck out or if he killed it, but that buck disappeared. And if you killed it, kudos to you. If you're listening, like you did something that I never even thought of doing, or I wasn't willing to do, like sleeping down there in this box canyon and killing this big buck, or maybe you just pushed it out. I don't know, but I'd love to know the end of that story. But it's kind of anticlimactic, but it still stings. Like I had that sucker dead to rights. Like I was going to kill that buck. And it was going to be crazy because I was basically going to jump on his back from off a cliff, not quite, but like practically I was going to be shooting that deer 30 feet straight down off the edge of a cliff when he's coming out.
Yeah. It sounds like a sheep or a goat hunt.
Yeah. It was just, I can't describe it adequately in words. It was super steep and it was between rocks. Like it was just, I'm not kidding. It was a 3 or 4 foot wide crack in the rock that he was coming up in 2 different places. And the previous year, like he'd used it like in that week leading up to November, like the last week, October, I think he used it like 5 times in a space of a week, like just, tons, just practically dead till he wasn't. So, and I have so many other stories, but yeah, that's just kind of a unique one. That's why I picked it.
How much more time we got, Jeremy?
Let's do one more and then we can wrap up.
One more? Okay. Mike asked, is there something Dan looks for to decide to hunt the reed?
Why don't we concentrate on Joe while we got him? Is there one for Joe on there?
Right. Is there any other newer ones? Because I had to move my phone over.
Okay, well, go ahead and look for a second. While we're doing that, I want to mention a few things, admin type stuff. First, I want to thank Joe for coming on and returning. I had a good time making that thumbnail. I hope everybody appreciated that return of the JoeRE.
I got a kick out of it.
Yeah, so that was fun, and it seemed appropriate since we hadn't heard from Joe for a while. And Joe, I think the message, especially in the beginning, super important, right? Like, it's easy to lose track of the future and to get caught up in the selfish stuff.
Yeah.
I think everybody on the call has probably been guilty of that at some point or another. So a great message there.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I mean, I haven't had these fewest standards for myself in terms of like what I want to shoot in 20 years, and I haven't been happier. So, last year I taught my wife how to bow hunt. She got her first buck. I'm looking forward to next year. My son's probably gonna, start shooting deer. Just, stuff that it's always been important to me, but now I definitely have more time for things like that. That's what I want to spend my time on. And I can't wait. I'm gonna have a pocket full of tags this fall. I just want to shoot as many deer as possible, like that's where I'm at, I'm maybe I'll kill a big one, probably not, but I think I'm going to shoot some and love every minute of it. So.
Yeah. Keeping it fun is a great message that I think everybody can get behind. And then one or two other things. So anybody that's interested, Dan put up a post on the community tab of the channel, but the Mobile Hunter Expo Northern Show. So that's Kalamazoo. That's coming up this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Dan, you're going to be speaking Sunday for sure, maybe Saturday. And and talk about the message for people that didn't see it that you put out on the community tab there.
Yeah, if anybody wants to come up and chat or anything, I'll be up there all weekend. I'm speaking on Sunday. It's just going to be kind of like a podcast format where I'm going to do one group thing, and I'm going to do one where they question me about hunting big bucks. And so that'll be Sunday, but I'll be there every day. If you're in the area, you go to the show, come by and say hi.
Yeah, and I think Saturday afternoon, right? Maybe you guys are having a little get together that you invited people to.
I just put that out on the just for the members channel.
Okay. Well, that's a good segue. So we did have our first members only live stream last week. Dan gave away his old prime bow. So in addition to all the Hunting Beast DVDs and other members only content, there's going to be some members only live streams and giveaways and stuff like that. So if you're interested, haven't checked it out, check out the membership. And then that was all I had. We'll pass over to Ashley, and then when we're done, Joe, hang on, because we'll hang up the stream, but we'll hold on for a second.
Okay.
Oh no, we lost Ashley's sound. We it's funny because we tried testing this earlier today, Ashley, because we've been having this problem and we can't figure out why. And I read a bunch of help articles about this program we use and stuff and couldn't figure it out. So I don't know. I can't hear, but some people are saying in the live. Yeah, now you're back.
Okay.
Oh, so whatever you did there, maybe that'll be a fix. So sorry, try again. We're trying to fix this.
All right. So there's an echo. Can you guys hear it?
Yeah. Go ahead, and I'll re-ask it if I need to.
Can you still hear me?
Yep, and no echo now. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Keith asked, has your kill percent on big bucks changed since you went trad? I asked this because I believe a trad bow is more efficient for killing whitetails in many scenarios.
Yeah. Well, I'm less choosy, undeniably. But I would say that's the fact. Like, I'm being less choosy, I'll be honest. Like, I'm killing deer that I wouldn't otherwise. I wouldn't have killed 5 years ago. I let them walk. But I'm not hunting that much, and I'm filling my tags. Like, I bet it's 40-50% of my hunts I'm shooting something. And that's, once again, like, that's not big bucks. I'm shooting a lot of does. I'm shooting a little buck or two. But I will say, like, when I release an arrow, I'm killing a deer. Like, I still have that mentality, and I think it's important. Like, I firmly believe you want to be as lethal. I said it earlier. I can't remember exactly how I said it, but I want to be as lethal as you can be. Absolutely lethal. I hope hope I get a shot. No, I'm going to kill a deer, and I'm not going hunting unless I intend to kill a deer. Like, honestly, that's it. We talked about, it applies big. It doesn't matter what you're hunting. If you want to be lethal, you need that mentality. Like, you're hunting to kill, and you're not going to hunt unless you're hunting to kill, so that's, I wouldn't disagree with it. I will say I am curious. Once again, like, I'm trying to be respectful. I know I've said some things about the traditional stuff. Like, I probably found it pretty finite, and I've got a few years of experience with trad gear for 20, 30 years that know 50 times as much as I know. I want to acknowledge that. But, like, I'm curious how far I can push it, because like I said, like, I am shocked how good I've gotten, and I know I can get even better. Like, I thought it was, you got to let it get within 10, 12 yards or you're not going to hit it. You're like, no, you can do better than that. So I'm curious how far this can go. After a few more years, with regular practice, get a routine that fits you, that fits your brain. Some people can do instinctive, some people can gap aiming, some people string walking. I need something to aim. I will say that. Like, for me, that was the hard thing to get over. It's like, nope, I know it's traditional setup. I couldn't bring myself to put sight pins on a recurve. I just can't do that. But, like, I had to have something to aim at, because holy crap, like, I just can't my brain just doesn't do like nothing there and thinking I'm going to hit it. I think I do well, and then heat of the moment, like just, bad shot. So anyway, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with him. I would, acknowledging that my standards are different. I'd say, I think I'm every bit as lethal as I was with a compound. So.
Well, awesome. Hey, Joe, I want to thank you again. Turn it over to Dan for anything final, and just remind everyone again that check out the Mobile Hunter Expo this weekend if you're in the neighborhood.
Yeah, Joe, it's just great getting you on here again. We hear about you all the time. Everybody's still asking about you and wondering about you. So it was really nice of you to come out of hiding and say hi. And
yeah, thanks. And hopefully nothing I said rubbed anybody the wrong way. These are my opinions. I have a deep respect for individual preferences and opinions. I'll share my own, but I will always listen to other people. So that's one last thing I'd like to communicate, and I've come, everybody's journey is a little different, like Dan, a ton of respect for you. We've gone through a lot of similar things from the sound of it, but you're still, focused on, a certain class animal, and that's an awesome thing, that's still in the back of my head undeniably, I won't claim to think, I see a big one jog across the road in front of me that I'm not like, oh, where's he coming from? Where's he going? Is he bending over there? It's in you. So.
Well, all right. Thanks, everybody. That's going to do it for today. We will be back next week, Tuesday, and maybe in the interim, we'll have a special episode. I think that might happen. So thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everybody.